Welcome to the first of the Foundation Accelerator webinars. So Fledge is a global network of impact accelerators. I'll tell you about some of these companies because these are some of the most amazing companies you've ever heard of. The most impactful company I think I've ever seen and ever worked with is Evernew. I met this entrepreneur. She walked into class one day about 6 years ago in my MBA class, and she said, "My partner and I have a technology that makes cotton recyclable. We can take all the clothes you're wearing, we can turn them back into clothing. And it's a chemical process. It can actually dissolve the clothing and then spin it back into fiber, turn it back into fabric, and turn it back into clothing." And this picture here it says jeans 1 of 2. This is the first pair of Levi's recycled jeans, cut and sewed by Levi's themselves, announced that that's a launch partner, and hopefully we'll see that in 2021 in the market. First product came out last year from Adidas and Stella McCartney. It's real, it works. And we can take the huge amount of farmland that is currently used to grow clothing, and we can turn that into farmland that's used to grow food. Because of course, as we all know, despite the pandemic, the population of the world will still be growing. And we're still gonna have 10 billion mouths to feed in a few years. We have some health companies in here. This one's Shift Labs. This is also a Seattle-based company, and they make this little product here called the Drip Assist. And all it's doing is counting the drips off an IV bag. Because if you've ever been to the hospital, and hopefully you haven't been recently, but if you've ever been to the hospital and you watch the IV bag dripping into the patient, if it was you or someone you love, it just kind of drips there and the nurse checks it every once in a while. Well, there's a lot of medicines where you want to know whether or not it's coming in in the right dosage. And the only way to do that today, besides this product, is a pump that costs $4,000. This is a $400 battery back product. This works anywhere in the world. It's been sold around the world. It's saving lives around the world. It's really simple. It's a non-toxic spray-on coating that stops steel from rusting forever. So if you see that tower in the background there, that looks familiar, right? That's the electric tower, right? We have this one machine in the US. It's called the electric grid. It's worth about $4 trillion. It will all rust away. Everything will need to be replaced in the next 30 years, or painted once, and then it'll last forever. All right, that's the kind of impact we're looking for when we're looking for companies here in the US. Back on the health side, we have a company on the outskirts of Seattle called Brio Tech. They have the world's best disinfectant. They're working right now to put it to use against the pandemic, but basically it's the active ingredients in bleach, but without any of the toxic parts. So it's safe to spray in your eyes, it's safe to put in your teeth, it's safe to swallow, it's safe to spray on anything, kills 99.9% of everything it touches. Tastes like salt water because it's made out of salt water. This company had a breakthrough on how to take this molecule that your body makes itself. It's the disinfectant your body uses, but find a way to put it in a bottle and have it last in a bottle. On the environmental side, this is a company called Arclight. They take any plastic waste and turn it into these, which are artificial rocks, which are used in or under concrete, right? They're a replacement for quarry stone. Company got started in Buenos Aires. We expect the next factory, when it's allowed, to get spun up in Los Angeles. We got everything we need to get that going this year. And we're going to tackle the problem of millions and millions of tons of plastic waste by turning them into the built environment. As I said before, I showed you the map, and we have a whole lot of African fledglings in this cohort. Well, that started about 5 years ago. The very first one we brought in was East Africa Fruits. All they do is collect fruits and vegetables from smallholder farmers. They work with about 3,000, 4,000 farmers in Tanzania. They sort the produce. They sell the best of it to the highest end customers, which were the restaurants and hotels, and will be again next year. They sell the rest of it to the informal sellers in all the towns in Tanzania. And they've increased the income of these farmers by a factor of 3, from about $600 a month to $600 a year to $1,800 a year just by farming and distribution. We have 2 honey companies. One in Tanzania on the left is Swahili honey. One is in Botswana on the right is Kalahari honey. Both of them work, again, with smallholder farmers, hundreds of farmers. They teach them how to do beekeeping. They add a second line of income to those farmers. They increase the crop yields on the farms. And in the case of Kalahari honey, there's one more benefit, which is there's a lot of elephants in Botswana, and elephants hate bees. So if you put beehives on farms, it keeps the elephants off the farms, which means the farmers get to grow the food and eat the food and sell the food, as opposed to having to shoot the elephants, is what they do everywhere else in the world. Keep going. We got this company called Zoeto in Malawi. They are the largest distributors of vet supplies in the country of Malawi. And I won't go through the whole story because it's one of these amazing investment opportunities. But this little tiny company came to Seattle in Fledge with this idea that they're basically the only income that farmers have in Malawi are animals. It's an extremely poor country. It's less than $1 a day on average for the entire country. But they have chickens and pigs and goats and a few other animals, and they're able to make a little bit of money off of that, except there wasn't really any vet supplies out in the rural areas. So Zoeto was filling in that gap. We wound up buying the distributor. So now we're the distributor, and we have stores across the country, and we're serving 100,000 farmers in Malawi. Somewhat similar story in the western part of Kenya. We have a company there called Chicken Basket. Chicken Basket sells chicks, feed, and vet supplies to any farmer in Western Kenya, and then buys back the chickens, slaughters them, and sells them to restaurants, hotels, supermarkets, and whatnot. And so again, we're creating income for rural farmers all across Africa using this model of aggregation and processing and distribution. I think there's two more on here. This one's Obri, Tanzania. We have a few in Tanzania. They just happen to be doing really well. This one got started by a middle-class woman about 4 years ago, was standing in the market and said, well, today I need to buy, I really need to buy domestic oil instead of that imported oil. So she looked on the shelf and there was no domestic oil. And so she got this in her ear and had to go look around and discovered there was no domestic oil. So it turns out Tanzania is a huge grower of sunflowers, one of the largest in the world, but no one was turning it into sunflower oil. They were instead shipping it off to Indonesia, processing it there, and importing it back. So she did the math. She started a company back in 2017, did a little bit of business then. Turns out she can pay the farmers twice as much for their sunflowers and sell the oil for half as much. And as you can see here, the business has been growing hand over fist on almost no money invested. Really, $47,000 in this company ever. And it made over $1 million a year last year. Then we're going to close on this one, which is the two biggest cook stove companies in Africa. So on the right, we have Burn Manufacturing, started by a couple of people from Seattle, a couple of Americans in Seattle. They were in our first session. All they had back then was an idea to build a factory in Kenya, and they had to convince funders that it was possible to build a factory in Africa that could outcompete the factories in China. They raised $5 million to do that and have proven it. They employ 160, 180 people in Kenya to do this. The guy on the left has a very different story. He was a refugee from Ethiopia when he was a teenager, also wound up being in Seattle, where a lot of these are Seattle because I'm based in Seattle. And so he drove a cab for a living, said he would never go back to Ethiopia, but he did. 2007, he went back. He had forgotten how poor it was. He had not seen the country in 7 or 8 years. And rather than just remitting money back to his family like every other sane person would do, Yusuf said, no, I have to do something. I have to actually physically do something. And so he and his brother figured out how to make stoves. So the stove, that is the Obama stove that you're seeing right there. They were the largest manufacturer of cook stoves on the continent of Africa and anywhere until Burn passed them up a few years ago. And Yusuf has now moved back to Ethiopia permanently to turn this into the biggest cook stove company on earth. Everything you see there is made by hand, no factory, all just hammered together with recycled steel. The stoves on the left, those sell for about $5.50 at a profit. And the stoves that they're making on the right sell for $38 for the same amount of profits. So I'm really proud of those, and I could keep going because we have 95 companies that we've invested in, but I won't, because I'm here to teach you something about investing.